Hello and welcome to another Clare Echo video special. Now we're unfortunately in post-mortem mode as Clare have exited the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship, and to reflect and try pick up the pieces, we're delighted to be joined by Munster Senior Camogie Championship winner Deirdre Murphy, All-Ireland winner from 2013 Darach Honan, and two-time All-Ireland winner Stephen McNamara. Guys, thanks very much for joining us once again. And Stephen, I'm going to go straight to you. Was the case of 3 games in as many weekends being too much for Clare, or do you think Waterford were just a level above?
I suppose you're going to have to look at the 3 games we actually played to give a fair assessment to the team. You look at the Laois game, you know, we battled with 14 men for nearly 35-40 minutes, which showed great character in the team, great heart, everything that you'd expect from a Brian Lohan team. But it was character that maybe we hadn't seen from the players since maybe 2018 that I was delighted to see. Then we moved on to Wexford. Look at Wexford and say they're issues and that they're issues, but we can only play what's put in front of us. And we tore into them. It was 70-75 minutes. Best performance we've had in a couple of years. There was a bounce in us. I always had a fear that the lads that battled that day against Laois, the momentum of Wexford, it was going to catch up maybe against against Waterford on Saturday. And when I look with 10 minutes to go, Hammy's chance, stuff like that, we needed to be getting the bounces because there was going to be an element of tiredness in the brain. So if we could get the lift, if that goal had gone in, or maybe David Fitzgerald's off the post, stuff like that, if they all come into play, we needed every bounce to be going with us to keep the energy levels up, or the bounce or the momentum. And maybe there was a little bit of mental tiredness there with 10-15 minutes to go. It was easy for Waterford to kick in. But it will be interesting to see how Waterford go on. Is it Saturday or Sunday? They're playing Kilkenny. They're 3 weeks on the bounce. So they'll have Limerick, Clare and Kilkenny. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on with 15 minutes to go in that game.
And Darach, I suppose one of the narrative after the Laois game was it was a bit disappointed, and you would have been one of the ones that maybe said it was a good win. But like, if you took Tony Kelly out of the picture, would we have beaten Laois, do you think?
Probably not, but I mean, why would you take him out of the picture? He
Why
plays
not?
for Clare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I stand by it. I think it was a good win. I think it was 50 minutes. We were down to 14 men. Battling performance, hit for 3 goals and still won. And as Stephen touched on it, like there was a bounce in the team that hadn't been there in 2019, and I think everyone was, encouraged by that. And that was the same against Wexford. I suppose as you go up the levels, any frailties you may have will be exposed, and I thought that was the case against Waterford. Concentration wise from the start, we were slack, and maybe that was a result of all the standing around before the game. But we were hit for the 3 goals. We were hit for, they were defensive mistakes really, and the last one being the most obvious, where there was 4 men drawn to the ball and 1 man left completely unmarked. And those sort of frailties, or those lapses in concentration as you go up the levels, will be exposed. But I suppose the other side of it is, it is a coaching point that should be easily corrected. It's something that Brian and the lads could work on. The problem this year was it was a short season, so you didn't really get those opportunities to work those sort of things out of a team. But I suppose next year would be the true test for Brian in terms of, can he correct those sort of things, those mistakes that we made defensively over the period of a full season.
And Deirdre, just looking, I suppose, at Clare's backline for a minute, like the players that have been there for a few years, Pat O'Connor's, David McInerney, Conor Cleary, Shane O'Morey, they never seem to be kind of kept in the same position. They're being moved around, and that's going back to the Donal Maloney and Jerry O'Connor era. But just, do you think we've maybe struggled to replace players of the calibre of Brendan Bugler and guys of that ilk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brendan Bugler, Patrick Dunn and Colin Ryan, there was a couple of players in 2013 who probably, when the All-Ireland was won, the highlights went to the real young, energetic, like Clare were so delighted to have these brilliant forwards and things. But they were at the peak of their powers in their mid-20s, and they were leading the team, and they're huge losses. It's tricky now as well. Like, you need a lot of matches at inter-county level to manage being a wing back when do I follow my man, when do I hold, the team has a plan when they're going out to, so often you're maybe going against your own instinct. But like, you know, we had very tough times in Munster finals in 93 and 94, and Brian Lohan, Sean McMahon and Anthony Daly all started all of those. And I mean, they went on to be the team and the men that they were. So I would say there's a good couple of things, and a lot of that will be down to the players, some of it will be down to the coaches, because it will depend how the four men you mentioned, how they approach next season, whether they hold off younger players snapping at their heels, whether the young players show that they're good enough to take over their mantle, and even to decide then, well, do you leave Aidan McCarthy in the backs? Do you send him up to the forwards? So I suppose, you know, the 3 goals, as Darach mentioned, they were things that, you know, once they're happened, there isn't much you can do to address them. I mean, Ronan Hayes had a mighty battle actually with Hutchinson all through, and you know, these things may happen. What can you do? You can concede maybe 3 goals and expect to win, but at the same time, you're probably looking at your defensiveness and how do you get mean and be better at man marking, and equally, how do you under pressure get away sensible deliveries, as well as maybe the last 20 minutes. We had a lot of the time we're breaking out of defence, we probably resorted to going into Aaron, and maybe he didn't have anyone hopping off him as much. So look at it, I would say that our backmen, you know, the way they played against Wexford after being under the cosh a bit against Laois was, you know, a testament to character, and that it will be interesting next year to see, but a lot will depend on, well, is there better out there, and can they show Lohan that they deserve their spot?
Yeah, and definitely, Deirdre, as you said, like Rory Hayes, I've never really seen it or can claim it as much that a corner forward scores 2-1, yet that you could say the cornerback had a very good game. But Darach, just to go to your point that the Laois, obviously, fair enough, David McInerney, and the coaching points that they'd hopefully work on, but were the frailties in defence, were they maybe a bit apparent in the Laois game where 3 goals were conceded? And would you say it's the short window of time that would maybe be the reason why that wasn't rectified?
Yeah, they were evident against Laois, but I suppose there was a different type of goal that was scored against Laois. It tended to be when they started to run at us from midfield, half forward line. That troubled us against Laois, and against Wexford they corrected that, I thought. You know, they didn't when Wexford were carrying the ball most of the time, it led to very, very little and nothing a lot of the time. And then against Waterford at the weekend, there was a different type of goal, so I suppose it hadn't raised its head yet, but it was just, I think it was concentration lapses. Definitely the second and the third goals, where, you know, you just, like, to leave that man unmarked when there was 3 covering defenders, you know, that's just a pure concentration lapse, and it's something that hadn't happened before, but definitely something that Brian would have to address after.
Even just to go to yourself, obviously a player of Tony's ability is great to have, and scored 153 of Clare's 589 in the championship. But from a management perspective, how do you go about making sure a team doesn't become over-reliant on a player of that calibre? Like, because we saw Liam Cahill was able to nullify it some bit with Calum Lyons.
I think we have to be fair with Tony, first of all, and say, I watched Ballier up close for a number of years, and as a club, everything's about Tony. And I've always wondered why we're not playing a bit more of that with Tony, with the Clare team. And I'm delighted to see the real Tony Kelly come out. The one, like, when I lived in Dublin for 10 years, and you're kind of talking about the Shanes and the Tonys and how talented these lads are, and you're mixing with the Tips and the Kilkennys and all these. And 13 is a long time ago, and now we're seeing the real Tony again, I felt, in that we're giving him the ball, we're letting Tony be the main man. Was Tony really curtailed on Saturday, or was it just an injury? Right? And I think we have to be fair on Tony. I know some Waterford people might say, oh, your man did a great job, lines on him, but Tony wasn't right. He was never right. He was injured warm-up. We can't judge Tony's performance or feel fair. I'm delighted that we're actually finally seeing the real Tony Kelly. It's up to and Brian has allowed that happening. You see the balls are being thrown off to him when he's moving, it's thrown into his pad. He's a great finisher left and right. I like the way we shook it up a small bit then with Shanahan, long ball in around, maybe too much long ball. There may need to be a little bit more work done on how we deliver, maybe lower, sideways, angles, directions, stuff like that. But at least it's going more direct, and we're working to our strengths. And Tony is one of our strengths. Unfortunately, he got injured. And there was always a fear for us. If Tony breaks down, how are we going to go? Because of the year that was in it, Brian hasn't had time to work. I know he's trying to work on direct, a bit more, rather through the lines, a bit more direct. But look, we can use a bit of everything. And Brian will concentrate on that going forward. I'm delighted to see the real Tony Kelly play. I'm delighted as a Clare man that he's representing what Clare hurling is really about. And people are getting to see Tony. Unfortunately, he got injured.
And Deirdre, as you said, maybe it's players to identify new players and to challenge the lads that are already in the backs. But what else do you think Clare can do to bridge the gap between the Waterfords and the Limericks, the teams that are ultimately in the last four?
Well, I suppose it is to, like, you could say any number of things there, but like we were just chatting before we came on, and maybe if Aaron's chance had gone in there 10 minutes to go, it was a different game. So I think it's very important for the players to believe that they're at the level with small tweaks and changes, because like if you look at anyone's inter-county career that goes on, 10, 11, 12, 13 years, like, Tony is in the shape of his life this year. Carl Malone is, Aaron Shanner is only 2 years recovered now from a cruise ship, probably getting to see the real player that he is. So like you can look at a lot of things. If you're looking solely at players, you're looking at, well, how is Colm Galvin going to return from his injury? How is John Conlon going to return from his injury? How is Peter Duggan going to be if he comes back from his travels? Will they be the same players? Will they be as good? Who are the players we can give a few chances to? So, I mean, that's players one element, and there's a lot of personal decision in that, because some players are able to give and get more out of themselves in a particular year because they're finished college, or they're living at home and they're not commuting, or there's loads of things that mean someone has a way better year next year than they did this year, or whatever. So that's, I suppose, a lot down to an individual. And then if you look at coaching and how do we do it collectively, then do you look at facilities, then do you look at money, then do you look at your administrative structure? Like, there's so much in trying to have things right. And if you look at Tipperary yesterday, like David Power will get all the credit for what happened, but Michael Quinlivan was going travelling, and Philip Austin was going to retire, and Colin Reardon was going to be in Australia, and only for all of those things came together, he would be probably written off as, well, he looked good when he was with them as minors, whereas now he's the Messiah. So like, I suppose so many small things have to align, and that's why I really agree with what Stephen said there. Like, I thought the first point Tony got, you could see Callum Lyons was running after him and couldn't stay with him. Now, David McInerney, I think, blocked him off a little bit, but he couldn't sustain that pace with a torn ankle, and that aided Callum Lyons a lot. I don't think Laois or Wexford decided that they'd give Tony the freedom in the park. The truth is that whoever was designated the job wasn't able to stay with him, and that if he had been in the full of his health, that might still be the truth. There's so much there that, I better stop talking now and let somebody else in, but like, there's so many variables there to everything working for your team to get success, that I think recognising that, and individual players recognising that them bringing a level of performance to next year that they might not have attained yet is often enough to tip the scales.
Darach, I suppose one of the positives yourself and Stephen have outlined is that Brian has helped to maybe reignite the spirit within the panel. Like, but how does this spirit get lost? Was it a case of Donal and Jerry maybe got a year too long and there needed to be that freshness, or what would be your thoughts on it?
It's an awful question for me.
I'm delighted you got it.
I know, like, I mean, like what Deirdre says, an awful lot of things go into any team, and sometimes a fresh voice like that is needed. I think Donal and Jerry can be proud of the job they did with Clare over their whole careers in 21s and senior as well, and sometimes just a fresh voice and maybe an emphasis on a slightly different way of playing at times can bring a freshness, but I'd also just like to really reiterate what Deirdre said there, like, we're not a million miles away from it. A few small tweaks and changes we could have won that game the last day with a few small tweaks and changes. Like, we gave them a 2-goal head start, and then, you know, our delivery when we were on top was very poor. Like Aaron Shanahan got the 2-1 all very quickly, and then we started shooting from out the field and putting it wide where the lads were inside, and I'm sure they were furious because I was furious watching it. They had them beaten all ends up inside, and we shot wide, and that dragged the life out of the team. And we were already a fatigued team coming in 3 weeks on the bounce. And then you had to start the second half. I suppose we kind of lost our structure a bit. And then when Aaron had a good chance, and it's probably a chance that he would score 9 times out of 10, when that was saved, that dragged the life out of us again. And it's like that. You need all those bounces, especially when you're fatigued. You need the breaks. And you'll find the energy then. But if the breaks go against you, it tends to drag the energy out of you. So I hope I evaded that nasty question there.
Obviously, in recent years, maybe some people have been critical that Clare stuck with a defensive approach in terms of their style of play. But on Saturday, when maybe things were going against them, Brian opted to bring in forwards like Aaron Cunningham, David Reedy, and Páraic McMahon. So, do you think he was right to take that approach, or should we have maybe rectified our defence a bit more?
Is that for me?
No, for Stephen.
We could all look at the defensive setup for the last, I suppose, 9-10 years, and we've been sweeper orientated. And I, for one, always feel that we shouldn't have really stuck to a certain pattern. We should have been able to play a game any which way we wanted and adapt as the game goes along. You know, get out, go play 15 on 15, adapt as you see the game. If we need a sweeper, if we need to change this, if we need to do that, I just feel for the last 7 or 8 years we've been too dependent on having a sweeper. I feel that a lot of our defenders have stopped defending because someone has been there for them, and maybe now we're paying for it in that we have lost the whole defensive. We've always been known 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the time, always having great defenders. It was probably not having great forwards is what cost us down through the years. And the team I was on, like that, they were an outstanding backline. You know, backs are kind of born and coached. I think we've gone away a small bit from it. I think Brian has gone with it and he's stuck with it. He's going to stick with it. We better get used to it. Men, like lads, are going to have to go one-on-one and earn the game, and he's going to adapt as he goes along. And I'm very, as Darach said, with 5 minutes to go in the first half, we brought ourselves back into it. We had them on the rack inside in the forward line, and it was up to the players to put the ball in low, give the decent ball in. The forwards have them. That's where processes and systems and all that breaks down for me. The game still has to be played at certain times in a match. And with 5 minutes to go, the game was on. It was Ed McCarthy had a bad wide, Shane had a bad wide. If those 2 balls had gone in and we had 2 goals, imagine them playing with the elements and going in 4 or 5 points down after getting a great start. We still have to play the game. You can't be processes and systems. There comes a time, and you'll see it again at the weekend, there'll come a time, the 2 matches, where it's in the melting pot and it's 5 or 6 minutes to go. All systems go out the window. It comes down to who wants it the most. TJ Reid will get a ball. He won't worry about what does the system say. He'll go through the middle, pop, and it's Kilkenny goal. And you'll see, and that's what the game is about. And until we realise we need to start hurling and adapting as the game goes along. Yes, we can have all the systems, but we shouldn't be going saying this is our only way of playing. We need to go 15 on 15 and adapt as we go along. And I was delighted Brian brought in forwards. Bring him in. If the ball hops, Hammy could have had 2 goals. You know, he was unlucky. He could have 2 goals, and we'd all be talking about Hammy here. He won the game. So why not? Why not change what we've been doing? Because 2013 is a long time ago for me.
Darach, I see you nodding away there, talking the sweeper, I think, as you'd want to contribute on that. Would you think we have been maybe stifled a bit by our over-reliance on sweeper in seasons gone by?
Yeah, I would, absolutely. I wouldn't be a fan of the system. I think you can create covering defenders without a designated 7th defender by allowing your centre-back to sit at times and to push up at times, and it doesn't need to be a designated 7th defender to do that. I think Stephen's 100% right. Lads get used to having a covering defender, a 7th defender, and it maybe limits their growth as a player as a result. And I suppose that would be a worry of mine when I look at some of the underage teams that we field playing with a 7th defender. And I think it's especially important for underage teams to get, like, for our underage backs that are coming up, to be able to defend their man without needing to rely on an extra defender there beside them. So I think that's definitely something that maybe has held us back, and but hopefully Brian will be able to correct it, going forward. I suppose what I was also nodding at there was just the ability to adapt during a game. Like we see there, I suppose our tactic all year has to be going long from puckouts. And you saw against Waterford there the last day, Páraic McMahon was picked out with a puck out probably 35-40 yards out from our goal, hits it long to Aaron Shanaher, and he catches it in a goal. And that was obviously as a result of Waterford lagging off our forwards, lagging off our backs and trying to compact their half-back line. And to be able to work that to our half-back to then bypass them was a great example of adapting during the game and not always needing to be told we're going long on every puck out or we're going short on every puck out. So I think that was a good sign. And then, there was also maybe bad signs, which we've touched on, where we were taking pot shots from out the field when the game was like we had the beatings of them all ends up inside.
Deirdre, just on the systems, how do you find the moderation between actually having a plan and then hurling with expression and freedom?
Well, look, I think if you were to take where Clare are now, I think the Limerick team themselves, when they were beaten by Kilkenny in 2017, they felt that things were starting to work for them. And there was very few Limerick people down in Kilkenny when they were beaten as well. They didn't feel, they came back with enough to feel that this is working. So I agree with Stephen. I think Brian Cody, he has, of course, a system, but like it is get your best player on the field and be able to win your own ball. I mean, you see Ryan Taylor there, our own clubman, like we'd be so proud of the championship that he's played, because every time there was hard ball in there, he did his best to win it. He had a great tackle count, came up with a great point, that really got us back into it the last day. And I suppose the more ball he sees, the more experience. The same with the forwards coming on. I mean, David Reid will probably feel very unlucky not to have been on or got a chance to showcase himself as well this year. He's still a very good player. Very hard for management when you have 19 or 20 people with not much to choose between them. I was trying to wonder all week, what would Lohan do with Jack? Would he start him or not? Because he hadn't got to play the last two matches. So would it be a master stroke or would it, So I think in terms of systems, as players get confident they're as good as anybody else, they're better at making the right decision more often, and that's where you see the Limerick full forward line at the moment. When there's nothing on, they let it high into Gillan and they have that option. But Graham Mulcahy was always fairly good, but until they came with the team they had, now he's superstar. He was always clearly worth his place in the Limerick team, but when he had better players in around him, the real star that he was emerged, and when the real quality of ball was going in. So the ball has been played to himself and Casey, suits them. But there's such a coolness in Limerick to choose the right option. It's not that they're wedded to a system, and as Darach indicated, they're playing with six backs, maybe with Honan making a decision about when to go and when to stay. So a lot of what we're talking about with systems is that, you're able to play the game as you see it, but you have some core beliefs as to how you're going to cover for people or what type of ball we're trying to get into people. You saw maybe Desi Hutchinson made a lovely catch there. Bronton Hayes couldn't do much, which was an angled ball sent in. That's the type of stuff that's part of a set play that's practiced and an ethos that the team wants to keep doing. So that's where the coaching comes in, but it's not, Austin Gleeson then hit one from the sideline. So I think, not being too wedded to it and having faith in your players is how Lohan operates anyway. And I feel that, like, it's his gas when you're talking here with 2 full forward line people who would, you know, experience what it's like to be chasing shadows and have your run made 3 times and things being covered by a sweeper. So, like, that maybe has us all influenced here. But I feel that we're on a good track with actually finding something that suits us.
And obviously to reach the last 6, given everyone that was missing, is a very positive campaign for Brian in that regard. But Stephen, to turn to yourself, what do you think would be the main lessons Brian would have learned from his first year as Clare senior hurling manager?
It's very hard to know what lessons he didn't learn, because is it really a full season? You know, we can only gauge on the 4 matches that were played. He definitely got to see who the characters were. He definitely got a feel for what's going on in inter-county now, because obviously he's been away from it for a number of years. Even though he'd been watching, everybody goes to the matches, everyone watches what goes on. We're very tuned into it. But I suppose, like, he's definitely going to stick with the direct hurling. We're going to get used to that. He's going to adapt as he sees matches. He maybe a bit of go through the lines, maybe direct, maybe a bit of everything. He has to include everything in the modern game and be aware of it, rather than saying this is the only way we're going to play. He's going to have to bring all styles and all systems and all shapes into it, and be alert and be ready to adapt whenever happens. And I think our players as well, and Deirdre's right, I think our players have to be trusted. And I think Brian will trust them to allow them to see the game as they see it going on, and allow them to develop and allow them to grow. I think we've been too... I don't want to be harsh on previous managements or any management, because anyone that takes on a job at inter-county level has to be congratulated, because it's a huge work. But I think we've been pigeonholed a lot in the last number of years. You know, let the game happen. You can't play the game on a chessboard before it happens, the week of the game, the month of the game. Things are going to happen. A player could get sent off. Your best player could get injured. We could all get struck down with COVID. Anything can happen these days, you know. You just have to be, I just think, trust the players, let them see it as it happens, have all the systems, but not concentrate on anything. And I think Brian will be one of those. I don't think he's going to nail his anything. You know, he's a character that, like, I know him a long time. He's a very straight, honest, direct character, and he has Clare in his heart big time. And, you know, any man that wore the red helmet the way he wore it, I think there's good things to come, and I do think the county are going to get behind him in everything he needs financially. Anything that man needs, I think we need to roll out and get it anyway, which we need to do.
And mention of the red helmet, it was confirmed last week in a radio interview with Clare FM that he still has it in the utility. So
worth a few pounds, I'd say. That'd solve Clare's GA finances issues. You're after that.
Deirdre, just to turn to yourself, like, about Stephen, what maybe Brian would have learned. What have we, the Clare hurling followers, learned from Clare this year and from Brian Lohan's management?
Well, look at it. I think they've given us a huge amount at a time where, if we didn't have the matches to watch in these couple of weekends, we had nothing to do at all. That, you know, to have that belief that like what Stephen said there, Brian took on that job because he believes Clare should have the best. Anything he's looking for is because, like, he just gets so excited by good players, you know, and he just wants Clare to have everything they can to give us a chance to be successful. And, like, if you're looking at the things that can be done, you're probably looking at taking the top 40 to 50 players in the county and asking them to do the things that will give them a chance to be a top inter-county player. And all of that does take resources and support and a bit of luck and individual buy-in. But I think we've got that feeling back, that, you know, nearly elemental feeling about supporting your team. I think that's the way a lot of people felt after Clare beating Wexford, that, you know, that rawness. And maybe those of us that have grown up with that 95 team, like, they kind of changed people's lives nearly, because Clare people afterwards believed we could do anything, you know. So it's interesting to see now, like, our generation are now in positions where we can help in different ways. And I think the onus is on us to do that. You know, Tony Kelly and all of those guys, they're in the prime of their lives now. And, you know, they want to feel that everything was there for them to get the most out of their careers. And I think that's why Brian took that job. That's why he is so appreciated is that, you know, there's nothing, he's just straight, he wants the best for Clare, and that hopefully that the players feel supported in that, and he and his management team feel supported in that by us.
And finally, Darach, obviously you've earned the reputation as being a kind of an oracle in this year's championship, and even though it wasn't mentioned in the column last week, I must say he did predict that Aaron Shanahan was going to have an influential role in the game. But looking ahead to 2021, Darach, are there any players that maybe Brian should be looking to bring into the panel that aren't there? Obviously, we know Mark Rogers, Keane Galvin and Shane Meehan are part of the training panel, but is there anyone else you feel that could add something?
Yeah, well, that was another plus from the year, the guys he found this year. You know, he's the goalie there that he's very confident with. I thought Rory Hayes had an excellent year, developed into, you know, he can be a great player for Clare over the next, hopefully, you know, 7-8 years. And I think that the obvious ones that are going to come in next year will be the guys coming back. How will they reintegrate? You know, they'll have a challenge for their positions. And then you have the young guys that you mentioned there, Keane Galvin, Mark Rogers. I'd be very impressed with the two of those, and from what I've seen so far. Now, it is a big step up, but to the next level, and they're still very young. So people are going to have to be patient when they watch them. But I think to get them a little bit more game time going forward, and they could add a new dimension to the team as well. So it's absolutely a bright future there. There's a huge potential in the county. I think we saw, you know, with things going right, despite all our problems this year with injuries, guys gone, our best player getting injured at the start of the game, we still could have won the game if things went a little bit differently, and then you have a lot of things to add back into that. So going forward, it is positive. I think next year will be the true test of Brian and his management team in terms of what they can achieve with this group.
Perfect. And that's a perfect note to leave it. So many thanks to Deirdre, Darach and Stephen for their contributions today and over the past few weeks. We'll have more in Thursday's Clare Echo, plus we'll also be looking ahead to Clare's All-Ireland Intermediate Ladies Football semi-final. So hopefully some way we'll have silverware coming back to Clare. So thanks very much to everyone for joining, and to you at home for watching.